What is up, everybody? I'm No Lex Given, and today we are back to talk about Season 1, Episode 2 of The Genius, The Netherlands, and I am joined once again by my co-host, Gemini. Gemini, how are you doing this week?
So you see, I was the one who told him to pick Nelk last week in the draft. That was me. Hi, Nolux. I'm just, explaining my victories from last week to the other players as I walk in. You know what I'm saying?
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. I'm excited to be back here. I'm excited to talk about a great episode
Yeah,
of The Genius Netherlands, like really good. And just a slight warning up front. I am, much like how you were last week, I am recovering from being a bit sick. So if at any point I'm a little sniffly or I sound a little stuffed up, it's because I am.
fair enough, fair enough. Hopefully by next week, both of us have it all ironed out. I'm feeling better. We are recording a little bit earlier in the day. I'm definitely not a morning person, so I'm waking up right now. But we have got a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, like you said. So I am excited to jump into it. I think that a lot of people were saying this was like a really great episode. I wish this could have been the first episode to get everybody really excited. I thought the last episode was fine too, but definitely a lot of exciting and fun moments in this one, and a lot of the players really bringing their A game as far as being willing to figure out the tactics and things going on in this game. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Last week it was fine. It was like a solid episode, but this week did feel like a good episode, like a really engaging good episode. And I'm happy that we did get it as early as we did to really help people continue to get engaged. I mean, like, yeah, it's great to have. And as we've said before, any episodes of the Genius are good episodes of the Genius,
For
but
sure.
it
And this
it
one
helps
definitely
when they're
felt
really
this
really
one
good.
felt like the Genius a lot more, right? There were a lot more
Yeah.
Genius tropes and things that we have grown to love. And that's going to start at the top of the episode. We've got the staggered entrances as we kind of recap the last episode, as you alluded to. We see Thomas and Nelke entering first, and that was really cool to see. That's something taken from the Korean version of the show. I want to put this at the top of the episode again as a reminder that there probably will be some spoilers for the Korean Genius as well. So just be warned. And then, of course, there's going to be spoilers for this episode because that's what we are talking about today. But cool to see the staggered entrances, and it looks like we're going to see a Nelke Thomas team up of sorts. And I felt like that's pretty good for them, considering these are maybe the only two players that might have some bad blood between them. So them working together really allows them to squash that, and it allows them to avoid a situation where Thomas is now getting picked for the deathmatch by Nelke, by somebody else helping Nelk win, and then Thomas getting thrown under the bus in that way. So I thought that was a good move. I don't know how much control the players had in that situation, as opposed to the producers just telling them you two are going to enter first together. But yeah, what do you think about this pairing here to kick things off?
Yeah, I suspect that they were probably put together as, sort of as you said, the only people with like real potential for drama. The only other combo maybe being Nelk and Fabian. But these two were probably put together, and I do think it really shows both of them as players, and it's a good sign for them that they're able to come in and, despite sort of having an awkward first round, they come in and they seem to get along really well, and they do sort of build this bridge, and I think that that's a really good sign for them and their instincts as players.
Yeah, and I did kind of feel like, at least in the edit that we got last week, Nelk did express that she was a little bit more at odds with Thomas than Fabian. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that part of that is just like when the two of them went up there and had to pick someone, Thomas was the one actually doing the talking and was the one that actually said Nelk's name, I believe, at the end of last week's episode. So, yeah, I thought it was good for them to kind of squash that beef. And then the second group that we see walk in is going to be Fabian, Rick, and Roxanne. And they seem to have, and I like this too, they reveal a lot of information that the other two didn't know about the previous week. With Rick saying that he played both sides in the deathmatch, and Roxanne revealing that she was the one that told Nelk to choose Jasper. She kind of lets on that was her doing there.
Yeah. No, as I alluded to when you introduced me, yeah, I found this really fun. Even though I don't necessarily think it's always the smartest to sort of expose your mindset
Yeah.
to other players. For the audience, it's really fun to hear you explain what you think you did and what you think you did well in the previous week. So I found that to be a really fun little moment.
It's both not smart because it lets other people know how much you're playing, and at the same time, there's an aspect of it that is sort of CYA, that it does sort of cover your ass because it's not like this was a secret. Like, obviously, Nelk knew. We didn't really talk about it too much, but Nuchka knew that there's when they flash back to the scene and show Roxanne telling Nelk to pick Jasper, Nuchka's like nodding along in agreement. And then, of course, the moves that she did to try to get Jasper to lose the deathmatch. That stuff is going to potentially be out there anyways. It's not like huge drama because Jasper's gone, but no reason to like seem shady on top of that. Just be honest, and you can kind of be unassuming a little bit in that way.
Yeah,
And yeah, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For Roxanne, there's no. It doesn't really matter because it's not like she's saying, "Oh, I told them to pick one of you." Like she's
Right,
saying, "I
right.
told her to pick the person who's gone." Pretty unconsequential. Rick is the one who's a little more, and I think that later in the episode, he really suffers from this. But he really likes to show the class his work. He really likes to say, "This is my mindset. This is what I'm doing, and aren't I fairly smart?" And I think a part of that might come from his history, sort of as a YouTuber, where he's
Yeah.
used to sort of telling the audience, "This is what I'm doing," and with not like the most confessionals and stuff, he's getting out that this is what I'm doing to the other players. Which in some instances is a little bit of like oh, okay, now we know where Rick's coming from. But on other instances, and especially later in the episode, it really shows, oh, Rick is smart.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's jump into this game here. We've got a really cool main match with a lot of different moving parts in it, and that is going to be Outnumbered, aka the 1-2-3 game, I believe it's called, right?
Yes.
And this game is originally from the very first episode of the Korean Genius, Season 1, Episode 1. So it's a game that both you and I are very familiar with. It's played the exact same way, though we'll say again, like, there could always be differences, and when the players aren't quite understanding something, that's always a moment for us to be like, oh, well, is that a rule in this version of the game, or is this version going to be a little bit different? But winds up being exactly the same, and for that, I guess there's not too much that we can talk about in terms of strategy, but I'm still curious to hear your thoughts when you first hear this game. How do you want to play it, or what do you want to do getting into a game like Outnumbered 1-2-3 game?
Yeah. Yeah. Outnumbered. Yeah. It mechanically is exactly the same as it was in the Korean show. However, in this version, it does play out completely different.
True,
And I
true.
think it plays out a whole lot better this time in terms of like more creative strategies to win.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. Like I really think that basically Rick's strategy was a really good one and probably what I would want to do, except without like, going around doing what Rick did socially. If you can avoid that but still pull off his strategy, I think that's ultimately what you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about the strategy or if we should go sort of right into what the episode starts to present us with in terms of like the strategic musings of these particular 9 players.
So, I think that this game does have some interesting elements to it. We see it here as episode 2 after they played a game with roles in episode 1 and therefore didn't really have too much control over their own actions. So I do still feel like this is an introductory episode for the players in that capacity. This is
Yep.
more, I mean, it's the second game of the season. These players still need to build trust with each other. And I think that that's kind of the point of this game. We do see this in like some orgs and things, some twists on variations of this game. And typically, early on, especially in any type of game like this, Survivor, Big Brother, etc., it's all about building trust and trying to find allies. And so I think that the interesting aspect of this game is it's meant to be played kind of in pairs. You can come up with a 4-person strategy like Rick and them eventually do, but it's also just very good and very tempting for me to want to do just a 2-person strategy. The trick is, I think, not that a 4-person strategy is better because it allows you more chances to win, but I think a 4-person strategy is potentially better because it allows you to build more allies. And so I do like potentially trying to do a group of 4 type thing, if possible, because then you've got more. Now, the more people you introduce, if you're able to get like a 6-person strategy together, because heck, you can even do a 12-person strategy, which is effectively how the game is going to come out. You don't want to be the person like leading that, because then the 13th person will feel some type of way about you. But yeah, I think it is a game that is quite honestly played in pairs. But if you can take a pair strategy, like let's say, just for a simple, like, let's dumb it down, you and a partner can score 3 and 3, and we'll get to why that's suboptimal later. But if you and a partner can score 3 and 3, it's just better to instead make that a 4-person group where you're still all scoring 3, but now you're building trust with 3 times as many people. So I think that is like definitely something to look for. But yeah, Rick has some interesting ideas as far as building trust, I suppose, in this one. But
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, but I agree with what you're saying. This is definitely a lot about building trust. Yeah, and I think if you're coming at it from the trust building lens, then absolutely, the bigger the group, the better. To a certain point, because as you said, like forming a group of 8 and having one person left out can just cause animosity. But as long as you're one of the 8 and you're not the person that the person on the outside blames, then it's still a fairly decent situation to be in. Yeah, the problem comes that the bigger your group becomes, the harder it becomes to protect your whole group. And that then becomes a bit of a risk where maybe you're building trust, but maybe you're building trust with the person who's gonna go home anyways, which is not the favorable position to be in. And as we see, like the 4-person group, it could have happened to them where they could have built trust within this sort of group of 4 and then had someone go, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And yeah, we'll get to that when we get into the episode.
Yeah. there's definitely, like, there's some aspects where the group of four does take some opportunities to build some trust among each other. But yeah, that's kind of like overshadowed by some of the other antics going on, which is fun, of course. We finally get to see the GCoins come into play in this
Yes.
episode. So you brought that up a little bit last week, and we did see during the Deathmatch that Fabian and Thomas both had 3 GCoins. Everybody else has 1. I wanted to point out that Nelk also only has 1. So there are some formats of the Genius where when you're eliminated, you either have to like will out your GCoins or give them to the person that eliminated you. But it looks like when you are eliminated, so are your coins. That's what they're doing in this season. So that is definitely nice to know. Any thoughts on that, or thoughts on GCoins in general?
Not really. They come up and they do definitely play a role
Yeah.
in this game, but not in the sense of we still have yet to see an opportunity to use them to get an advantage in a game.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I think that it how they ultimately function in this season will, in a fairly large part, come down to how they end up functioning within the main matches themselves. But even the fact that they're here, as we will see later in the episode, it drives a lot of strategy in terms of people feeling like, oh, they will be important, so we should think about collecting them. Yeah, and so they definitely play a huge role in this episode, and I expect they'll probably play a fairly big role in upcoming episodes.
Yeah, we'll see things like, just like as an example, you can use a G coin and then maybe you get an additional pack of 3 cards, a 1, a 2, and a 3. And so then it becomes a little bit about how much do players want to use their G coins in this game as opposed to saving them for future games. And that's definitely an interesting aspect. They definitely do come into play as we learn a little bit later. They're going to be like the tiebreaker for the game. So that part's definitely interesting. And I think that like already we're seeing the players really care about them and use them and trade them as currency and stuff. And I think part of the drive behind this episode is whoever has the most G coins could win this game. And so if you see that, you're thinking like, well, then I really want G coins because I might want more G coins to win the next game. And so the players are definitely already thinking about that, which is certainly cool.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I had forgotten that they were using it as a tiebreaker.
Right.
And I think that definitely, that goes a long way into making players realize, oh, okay, these do play a definite factor. These can be very important. Yeah,
For
so
sure.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So as we get into now some of the strategies now that the players have seen the game, Rick immediately realizes and says you can just play 9 games with the same person. That is going to be pretty important. There's only 9 players there, so it'd be tough if you couldn't like replay games with the same people, but that would be like an interesting way to play it. Obviously a lot more room for deception and things like that, but would probably play out. I don't know. Actually, yeah, that would change the whole game, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, we see the strategy start. Yeah, we see them all start to sort of form their own groups. So we see Rick and Fabian come together as like one of the first sort of groups we see. And as we sort of talked about earlier, we also see Thomas and Nelk come together as a group.
And before that, even we have another genius trope to talk about. We get our first flash forward.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So we are that's something that happens a lot in the Korean Genius. but we're going to get a little bit of a glimpse into the future. The first clip is kind of confusing. It's with Nelkin. You can't really tell exactly who she's talking to or what she's saying, but she's saying if this goes wrong, we're massively screwed. And then it cuts to Nazar, and if you're familiar with the game, which we didn't really talk about when talking about the game, but I guess we did a little bit, but I saw this clip of Nazar saying, one of us will have to bleed, and immediately realizing, okay, Nazar is going to be in a group of 3, and they're going to realize that with an odd number of players, somebody's going to be left with a card. So that did give away a lot if you are familiar with the game, but still really cool to kind of have like a flash forward foreshadowing, very geniusy edit there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was great to see that little bit of like, oh, what's happening in the future. And I will admit, one way they did sort of get me was I assumed the same thing with the Nazar clip, but if you see, he is sort of like a little happy and smiling, and that made me think that maybe like he had already used up all of his cards, and that's when he was saying it, and he was like, uh-oh, looks like one of you two are in trouble, and that's why he wasn't so upset. But as we'll see later, that's not the case, and he's simply not upset for different reasons.
Just has a good attitude there. But then we get into our different groupings. So we see the other one that you didn't mention is Nuchka and Roxanne, and they're gonna like rip up some paper and make some cards. But definitely cool to see those. These are the players that at least have some angle on the fact that you want to be in a pair to play this game. And I think that was a little bit helped with Rick's table talk of, can you play 9 games against the same person? Because then that's Nelk's plan with Thomas, and Rick's plan with Fabian, and Roxanne and Nuchka are thinking the same thing.
And then that leaves our unlucky trio of Nazar, Annamaja, and Feride, who unfortunately come together before realizing that being a group of 3 is not the optimal way to play this game for all of the group's safety.
We have both independently, Rick and Roxanne both express that there's going to be 1 card left over. We get that pretty early on in the episode, and definitely kudos to them. It felt like they both got there right away. They realized that there's going to just be 1 card left over with an odd number of cards on an odd number of players. So really, that's the game already. They've really solved the game. Everything else that happens in the episode is fun and fluff, but it's almost a distraction, because this really is the most important part of the game, because it's going to determine who loses, and once you know who loses, that really should change how you play. And that's kind of next level thinking for players that are brand new to the format like this. They are definitely still a little bit more used to potentially, and I think to explain some of Rick's actions, I think that there's some confusion because in main match 1, the winners picked the elimination candidate. So I think some of Rick's ideas are in terms of thinking that he's going to get to pick the elimination candidate again. But really, the person that's going to be the elimination candidate is going to be from that Nazar, Feride, and Annamaja grouping where there's an extra card.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. I do think, though, in this game, compared to some other ways it could play out, well, yes, knowing who loses is a big deal. This is one of those rare games where we know the person who loses decently early on, and we know who he wants to pick. And because of that, the episode sort of shifts into a, will he get to do that? Will the person he wants to pick end up winning and end up safe? And I think that is really good for the episode, because it at least leaves it so that even though we have a fairly predictable outcome in terms of the loser, the winner is still very much an important factor and not decided on until right near the end of the main match. Yeah.
I think that for the drama side of it, it's definitely good. But what I'm saying is for the tactical side of things, as we're gonna, I'm jumping ahead a little bit maybe, but once you realize that you understand the mechanics of who is going to lose the game, the first, I guess we just have to, I'll jump ahead because it's the point that I'm getting to right now. Rick knows that the loser is one of the three of, again, Nizar, Annamaja, and Feride. And if I can find the quote that he says, Rick goes up to that group and goes, well, it's not going well here, is it? And then is like kind of cocky, kind of boastful. And I'm like, dude, these are the people that are going to lose. Like, if you do anything this game, it's just be nice to these three people. It's not necessarily mean to explain to them they've lost. That could actually be a good social move and allow them to at least realize it. You can say, oh, I already have a plan with Fabian. And I'm like, so I can't help you out personally, but I'm letting you know this so that way you can potentially act on it. And then, oops, well, you can't act on it because everybody else is already partnered up. But don't go up to those people and like antagonize them a little bit. That's more what I'm getting at, is like, for somebody that understood the game so well in Rick, he really did not understand the game at all, in the fact that the whole game is about the fact that the loser's already been decided, and that's the point that we'll get to eventually.
Yeah, I completely, I agree with that. Rick is very much like sort of Jasper last week, where he understands the mechanics of the game extremely well, but misses this like bigger picture focus on the game, which is the social aspect and the goal of avoiding being that one person who ends up getting eliminated, where much like how Jasper last week made too many lies and too many schemes because he missed that this game wasn't a lying game, Rick didn't super realize that this game was less, and it is still about who wins, but it was sort of less about who wins and more about who loses, and he didn't focus on that as much, where he was so focused on winning that he just sort of, everyone who was outside of that plan doesn't get great social reception with Rick.
It's definitely funny, and I like, I part of the tricky thing with the Genius is always that winning is going to potentially make enemies, and so the like stronger strategy is a lot of times, as we talked about last week, to just not lose. That's not as fun though, so I'm definitely glad that Rick tries to go for the win, and then at some point like kind of needs to go for the win because he's put his foot in his mouth so many times. The one thing that I like too is that at the very start of the episode, well, not at the very start, but right now in the episode, at the beginning of this like planning phase, we see Rick and Fabian have a handshake. And I kind of touched on this a little bit last week, but for me, this is like as close as you can get to a solid agreement and arrangement in the Genius, is a handshake at the start of the game where the players agree that they are going to win for each other. And it's a little bit shaky for a second. Rick is like, you're going to give me the ring of life if you win, right? And Fabian's like, yeah, dude, like, we don't have to talk about that anymore. We already shook hands, we're good. But I really liked this because I felt like they shook hands and both of the players understood what it meant. And from here on out, Rick is working as hard as he can for himself, but he's equally working as hard as he can for Fabian to win. And the handshake agreement really mattered for both of these players, I think.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's been, you talked about it last week, but where coming to sort of a deal at the start of a round rather than one later in it just feels more powerful because you're playing the whole round for both of you rather than for yourself, and then right at the end for the other person. It feels harder to go back on. And I think that's definitely the case here, where even I don't want to get too far ahead, but like even at the end, Fabian is sort of the only person who doesn't in any way try to distance himself from Rick by the end of sort of the episode. He's the only one who still is defending him because they have that connection and that trust there.
He got it. Yeah, he got that. That was the handshake agreement. That was like an implicit pact. And Rick, while he makes some interesting moves, and you don't have to make every move that's going to socially benefit the person that you are working with, but as far as you go in that game, he never sold Fabian out. He was always trying to get Fabian the win. He was just trying to, at some points, sell other people out. He didn't want Thomas to get the win, but he always wanted to get Fabian the win and never strayed from that. So I respected that a lot. That was like an agreement. And I'd even go to say to like, not sure how far you want to go with this, but if you shake somebody's hand, that is then an agreement. If you then shake another person's hand, that's a lie. Not the first handshake, but the second, you can do a fake handshake and then pretend that you are going to be working with somebody else, but it's that first one. Who's ever handshake that you shake first, that's who you have to honor, and that's who you have to play the game with. And it is very much a first come first serve in terms of loyalty and trust. And we sort of see that here, where even like the group of three who know that they have to like oust one person are still like, but we're gonna work as a collective group of three, because early, like right from the get-go, relationships do go a shockingly long way. Yeah. So Rick and Fabian, they know their plan. They're on the same page as far as that part of the game is concerned, but they're not on the same page 100%, because they wind up joining Thomas and Nelk just to kind of see where those two are at. And I don't hate this, because from Rick's perspective, he really wants to go and talk to Thomas because Thomas is the other player with a GCoin lead. So from that aspect, Thomas is the only other team that could do this 6-0 strategy and potentially stop Rick from winning. So Rick wants to go in there and figure out what's going on with Thomas and Nelk, but they don't really get on the same page in terms of like what information they're willing to give up and what information they're trying to get going in there. And that leads to our first like China shop interaction, where players are in the same room kind of with different ideas of what information needs to be shared here.
Or Rick in a China shop. He and Fabian come in with the sort of, I believe at this point they already have a 9-0 plan. That's their plan. So they come in with that, and they start talking to Thomas and Nelk, and it becomes clear that Thomas and Nelka don't have the same plan. They don't realize
they're
you
like
can trade
10
yet.
levels of strategy behind. They're
planning
on doing
like
a 3-3, which is so many levels behind. And it's tricky because so Fabian has the relationship with Thomas, and there's an aspect of like, okay, you want to win the game, but like I said, you also want to build trust. And so I feel like Fabian sees this as a way to kind of build trust. It doesn't hurt him at all for somebody else to try to win. And in that way, like, if Fabian leaves that conversation and doesn't tell Thomas and Nelk the strategy, he's kind of lied to them. And I think that that's what Fabian is trying to avoid here. He's trying to avoid a situation where at the end of the match, Thomas and Nelk are like, wait, you realized that and didn't tell us.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that, for sure. I think, yeah, it's not even so much just that he lied to them, it's just that he views it as a way to build trust.
Yeah.
And so I think it is why he wants to share to like build that trust. But it immediately starts to send Rick into a not so great spot, because the one team that couldn't know about this plan that would have the GCoins to essentially force a true tie and not give Fabian the extra ring of life to give to Rick is this team. So as soon as they know, it suddenly becomes this really awkward moment where Rick has to be like, well, yeah, you guys could go for a 9-0 as well, the same way we are, but I don't want you to, because that's not good for me. And he's pretty upfront about like, and I think he's trying to be like, it's not about you, it's just about, I want safety.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, you can't win. So I need to convince you not to win.
Yeah. And this is definitely going to start the drama. But what's funny is like, they're so far beyond in levels of strategy, and eventually they probably could have gotten there, especially if you like give them a few hints. But it's like, okay, they have to realize that instead of going 3-3, they should go 9-0, and then they have to realize that you can trade cards. They have to decide that they want to go for the win, because right now it's not like they're planning on doing like a 5-1 split or something like that. Like, they had already kind of talked about doing 3-3. So it doesn't really even seem like they're going for the win. They don't understand trading. And then if they understand and think that they're going to go for the win, then they also need to know about the GCoin tiebreaker. And there's just like so many levels that Rick is so far ahead on, and kudos to him for that. But yeah, he definitely got like overly cautious here a little bit, but who knows? It could have played out a different way, and maybe he could have lost because he wasn't doing as much as he did, and he does wind up winning eventually. So it's hard to fault like his strategies in that capacity, though there's definitely there's some issues with his strategy for sure.
It's a little messy, and it is very clear that he just sort of panics once Thomas and Nelk find out about the strategy from Fabian. He just kind of panics a bit, and I think in his mind he sees, there goes my ring of life, there goes my chance, it was just blown. And so he starts to do a bit of a spiral, and it leads to a pretty awkward conversation that does ultimately come to sort of the decision of, we need to work as a 4, but in like a very awkward, tedious, not super we all trust each other agreement to be a group of 4, with Rick pushing really hard to say that Fabian has to be the solo winner.
And we did talk about this a little bit, but this is where Rick goes to, before they all get on the same page, he is going to try to secure his victory without Thomas. And the way that he would do that is he needs to get one more GCoin. So he wants to borrow a GCoin with interest from somebody else, and he approaches this group where he needs something from them. He needs one of their GCoins, and I don't know. He goes up to them, and I feel like he's just going to talk first, and he's going to think about the implications of what he's saying socially. I want to say afterwards, but also maybe never. Maybe that just never thought about the social applications. But he knows he needs a GCoin. He goes up to the group of Nazar, Feride and Annamaja, and says, so not going well here, right? And And yeah, like I said, he's like kind of cocky, and the whole time is I'm just thinking like, you like, you're doing all of this work for the GCoin, and again, it's cool that he wants to win, but and this, I think, is, I brought this up previously too. I think a big thing to understand is probably that Rick currently, because some of what he's saying doesn't make sense. He's like, if you give us a GCoin, then I'll spare you guys from the elimination. That's his bargaining chip. I'll give you another GCoin back later. You give me one now, I'll give you two back later, and you won't go into the elimination. Which isn't something that he can actually promise, but I think he thinks it's something that he can promise because of how the first main match worked out.
Yes. No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, he comes into the conversation. Yeah, he leads with the sort of things aren't going well. And I think that actually his lead into the conversation is really telling of a lot of things about the way he's approaching it, which is sort of how we talked about Jasper last week. Once again, drawing back the comparison where we talked about how Jasper had the mindset of, if you're sort of a wolf, then you think everyone else is a wolf in sheep's clothing waiting to strike.
Right.
Rick has figured out the game, and I think his assumption as he walks around is that everyone else is at the same level that he is. Well, this group of three hasn't even realized that they have an odd number of cards, and that's a bad thing yet. So he comes in going like, oh, guess things aren't looking great for you guys, and they're completely thrown off. And I think it sort of leads to this, just really awkward conversation where he explains to them that having 27 cards between the three of them is going to be a bad thing, and then sort of leads into this, well, I'm going to win. So if you want to invest in the Bank of Rick, we can give you interest back and protection because we're going to win because we know what we're doing and you're in a bad position, which isn't, well, it may be sort of the truth where ultimately Rick does win, or Rick's group does win, and the group of three is in a bad position. It's not the greatest to hear it from someone where you're just sort of talking over strategy and then someone comes in and says, hey, you're going to lose. So how about you lose, but you get some stuff out of losing because I'm winning and you helped me win.
And they're still trying to figure out the game too, to like, so they've got a lot to wrap their heads around here. What's interesting is like part of the implication, let's say Rick does understand all aspects of the game, he's almost actually, and this is going to lead to the awkwardness in the next conversation, if he is promising, for simplicity's sake, we'll say Nizar his safety, despite Nizar having one card left at the end, he's saying we won't pick you for elimination. That actually means he's planning on bringing Nelk into the elimination again. If she's going to score 0 while Thomas scores 9, and then they beat Thomas on the GCoin tiebreaker, that's actually kind of the implication that he's selling out the other people in his room, which is why he's a little bit awkward when they wind up coming in and spilling the beans. And we'll get to that in a second, but the episode does jump over to Nuchka and Roxanne, who both independently, they realize a lot of things. They're really, they figured out a lot of stuff here. One thing is that they have realized that not only can you do a 3-3 game without trading and stuff, but you can do a 6-3, and that is a really good way to split the 9 cards that you're given at the start of the game. So I thought that was really good. I believe, and I'm not super great on my like Genius history and didn't go back and watch the episode, is that even something that the Korean players realize ever? Do they get to that point, or is that like said by the announcer or something? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, the first episode, it has this whole vibe of, and this is why I think this episode that we watched, this second episode of the Netherlands version, is so much more is I think that players are much more playing to win in that version, whereas in the Korean version, it's the first ever episode. Players just want to be safe through the first episode.
Sure, yeah.
So a lot of them are pitched by one contestant comes up with the idea of this. One player gets 3 wins, one player gets 3 wins, the remaining 3 ones tie, you're out of cards. Your pair is safe from being the elimination candidate. So
but even
a lot
if
of
you're going
pairs
to do that, like it's just strictly better to do the 6-3 than to do a 3-3. There's no reason not to. You're just throwing away 3 points. So I thought that was a really good observation.
Yeah, a lot of players don't go there. There's like one pair that does come up with 9-0, but then chicken out of it, out of like this sort of fear that they could put the person at 0 in danger, or that 9 might not be enough to win, which ultimately costs them. But in this game, it wouldn't have, because as we see, that is what happens. But like, I definitely think that these players very quickly, and like much quicker than in the Korean version, hit a point of not just going for safety, but going for optimization. And that leads them down this path of going, oh, we can go 6-3. Oh, we can go 9-0.
The first game, definitely a lot of these players were confused, but it was really cool to see in this game that I thought, for my money, like the players had a better understanding of it than when we saw the Korean players play it, and that made me think, okay, this is going to be fun. We got some real gamers here, and the main 2 people to give credit to in this episode, I think, are Rick and Roxanne, who both have the deepest level of understanding of these tactics, that both come to all of these same ideas together. Roxanne then realizes they can do trading, and they come up with the 9-0 plan independently. But yeah, I think that this was great by her, and Roxanne also has the social aspect of the game a little bit better. She says, like, very relaxed, laid back, no stress, all while also coming up with the plan to potentially win. So I thought she was looking really cool here.
Yeah, we'll get to, because Roxanne and Nuchka sort of, they come up with their plan, their 9-0 plan, and they just sort of stick with it. Unlike how they're sort of, I feel like, at a point where they're like, this is a good plan. If we win, we win. If we don't, we're probably pretty fine. Maybe the person who got 0's in trouble, but I feel like they're of the mindset that you really can't do better than 9-0. You have 9 cards each. You can only play 9 times. You get 9-0. That's their mindset, I think, at that point. So I think that they're pretty fine to just go for 9-0. And they're going to show up very briefly when they play, and then a little bit again when the whole shenanigans break down of the 3 group playing, and then the 4 group finally getting around to playing, and all of that. They're going to show up a little bit, but they're not super major roles this episode, but that doesn't mean that they don't do well. Like, I think that they both do very well here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd honestly say, well, yeah, it seems to me like tactically Roxanne does just as well as Rick. There's no way she's going to be able to do anything about the GCoin tiebreaker. And Roxanne knows that somebody else is going to lose the same way that Rick knows somebody else is going to lose. And her play in that scenario is, let's just do our own thing. And I have to believe that that's part of it, is like, okay, let's not try to piss anybody off. Like, I think that she has that social aspect of it a lot more nailed down. But we could get to some of the social aspect. Next thing that happens in the episode is that Bull entering the China shop, where we've got the other 7 players all in a room, and all with different pieces of information that makes things very awkward. But part of the issue with this is Rick also didn't even tell Fabian that he was going to approach this other group and try to grab a GCoin. So it's all just like very cagey. Fabian, I think, quickly understands that this wasn't a move against him, but rather a move against Thomas. But it's still a little bit nerve-wracking to know that this is a player you're going to trade 1-for-1 with, and then 3 more players come in. And I said that it is like an elephant in a china shop, but it's also like Rick is balancing a bunch of plates in that china shop. And like this can definitely all unravel and be quite terrible for him. He is kind of going to wind up coming clean to Thomas, but a very, very awkward situation for him.
Yeah, the most that can be said about this whole interaction is just that it very much drives home the point. This is the point of no return where
Yes.
Rick has to win at this point because the group of 3 is no longer happy with him. It's messy. It does ultimately put his win in jeopardy because I think that it's not a great look to Thomas and Nelk, who he needs if he wants to win. So it's overall probably for Rick this like just the scariest moment of the whole game so far, because this is the moment where he is most at risk of just not winning the main match, being picked for the death match, and very possibly going home if that's the case.
And before uniting this group of 3 against him, he actually didn't need Thomas and Nelk to win, but now you have this place where these players have 27 cards, and now you might need Thomas and Nelk to win, and you're just like, yeah, like you said, I think that I really like that Rick wants to win, and I don't like that now he has to win. So that part definitely feels a little bit awkward. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tricky place for him. But before we even get to him like deciding to work with Thomas and Nelk, he even goes back to Annamaja and tries to offer the coin deal again, and now he's like potentially even willing to offer up like, you give me 1 coin and I'll give you back 3 coins. He's willing to, there's going to be 3 coins if Fabian can win. So Fabian gets 1, Rick gets 1, and then 1 can go to the group. But now he's saying that Feride and Annamaja, you guys can both have the other 2 coins. And at this point, what is he even doing it for? Like, if at the beginning of the episode he wanted to win because you get more coins and the coins can help you win, now he's not even playing it for the coin, he's just in it to win it. And kind of has to, as he just digs this hole deeper and deeper, going back and forth between Thomas and Nelk and Annamaja and Feride there. So very silly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I guess now this is the point where I think the actual playing of cards starts to happen. Am I right?
I think I have a little bit more even.
One more? What did I forget about?
No, just about like the social part of it. I felt like we didn't really see Thomas be super tactful. Like we said, they like had kind of come to the 3-3 part, but I feel like you give Thomas a little bit of rope and he's gonna figure out something, and then Thomas and Nelk say, we'll do it, we'll do the play, you give us the coins, you guys can win. And that's when they get into that agreement and they realize that Thomas and Nelk are going to be the ones that get the coins. We also have... We
should have talked about that.
Yeah, we've got Nazar coming back from the bathroom as well, and with he comes up with a really great plan that he's gonna lose.
I forgot that happens pre-playing.
There's a few more things even, but yeah, that it wasn't so much of a brilliant plan, but I do think that this part has to get talked about a little bit because it's it's who's gonna lose. They aren't necessarily like solidified up until this point which of the three of them is going to lose, and Nazar decides to bite the bullet and try to grab some social capital from being the person that's going to go into the death match. And obviously the two women are on board with this plan, a little bit skeptic. They don't really want this to happen. They wanted to win or play with Nazar, but it's kind of unavoidable, so it's kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card for Feride and Annamaja. And honestly, I thought that for the situation that they put themselves in, this is a really good play from Nazar, who probably already lost, and, you know, one of us has to bleed. That's the phrase there. And now he gets to turn this blunder into an opportunity to make some really good allies, some really tight bonds for the games coming forward. So what did you think about this when we see this from Nazar here?
I mean, I never think, say, volunteering to go to a deathmatch is like a great call, but given that someone had to do it, and obviously you really don't want to be, if you're in that situation, you don't want to be two people who say, okay, well, sorry, you're the odd person out, you have to do it, because then, like, they're going to turn around and pick you almost definitely. And you're not probably winning this game. Like, I think they all knew that at that point, or at least didn't have the mindset of, oh, we're winning. So Nazar volunteering is good for all three of them in that sense, where they definitely get to stay united. They get to stay this very strong group who, had he survived, will continue forward. Would continue forward. But like, as I sort of said, I think if there is, and obviously it might not have been possible, like the two girls probably never volunteer to lose. So, but like, you never want to be the one person to take the fall, but if you ever have to take a fall, which he kind of did, it's a fine situation to do it in, because at least he is getting a lot of social capital out of it.
Yeah, and there's nothing to be done. I mean, the play here for Nazar is either, there's two ways to go. You can either try to piss more people off in potentially trying to come up with a way to get rid of your final card. Ultimately, there's no way that a play like that could have or would have worked in any capacity for him, though. So, yeah, there's nothing that he can do. And recognizing that, instead of trying to make more enemies, trying to make more allies, I think is something smart that, again, we don't really see from the Korean Genius either. There's maybe some episodes where players will like think about throwing, especially towards the end of the game when there's less players left, but that definitely has a different feel to it. Definitely nobody willing to go this far to make allies early on in a game of the Genius. So I thought it was pretty good, just overall social awareness from Nazar.
Yeah, really the only other thing they could have done was gone to one of the four, maybe like Thomas or Nelk, and offered them a win in return for joining them and making them into a group of four. But of course, like, even then that's a risky situation, because then, like, there's still a good possibility that whichever two of the four don't get safety in that case, whoever from the new group of three loses just picks one of them anyways. So it's like, the odds that all three of them would avoid the deathmatch are pretty slim. So yeah, from that perspective, if Nazar feels like, hey, I could win the deathmatch, then sure, go ahead. Go for it.
There is still a little bit of silliness that's going to happen too. This whole group is going to go back into the China shop, and just immediately Rick goes, too late, no deal, waves them off when they try to come in. And we see Thomas recognizing that it's like bad to be angering these other players, but Rick just has no idea. And continually then like goes back to them even one more time, and he's like, okay, I know I just waved you off, but what are you proposing? Like, what's it? There's so much back and forth, and the whole time I'm just like, at some point you've got to realize that these are the players that you're going to make. Well, you're not going to make, but these are the players that are losing the game. So definitely some looseness around that. I did want to point out one other thing here too, that when Rick walks away from Farid's group, there is a little bit of Farid asking Nazar if he's sure he wants to be the loser. And I think Farid was also willing to do it. And she's like, all like, are you sure it's going to be you, Nazar? Like, not me? And yeah, so they've definitely all built a really good alliance with each other. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's like, it's good to ask that from Farid because Nazar's already
Yes.
kind of resolved to do it himself. Maybe she didn't actually want to do it, maybe she did, but she at least asks. And then Rick is, just for good measure, gonna go see if he can piss off the last two players in the game too, and he goes up to Roxanne and Nuchka and has a fun little interaction there. I said that Rox played this conversation really smoothly, I felt, and Rick, like, these are the two tacticians of the game. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Rox also has the social side of it because she plays it so smooth and he just gives it all away. He goes in and he goes, so, you haven't found a way to win, have you? Which just, like, says everything without saying it. And this is one of my favorite aspects of games like this in general, but one of my favorite things to do when playing games like this and watching shows like this is looking at a conversation and looking at somebody's words and realizing all of the things that they're saying without saying. And Rick, by saying, you haven't found a way to win, have you? I think is letting on that he has. And that he's nervous that they have, and all of these other things. He just gives it all away, and then he even says, I'm gonna score 0 this game. So if they didn't already know about the 9-0 plan, he's definitely letting on that that's what he's gonna be doing. And because the women know about the possibility of doing the 9-0, but Rick's trying to suss this out, trying to figure out what they know. They give him absolutely nothing, and he gives them absolutely everything. So, really silly conversation. He walks away, and they go, you cheeky bastard. And part of that was him, like, potentially maybe looking at their notebook or something. I thought that was fairly harmless, but still another not great conversation from Rick.
No, yeah, it does just basically show the difference between the two where, Roxanne came up with her strategy and said, all right, I have it. I'm going to try and then, like, piss off as few people as possible. Whereas Rick came up with his strategy and obviously didn't go, well, let me piss off as many people as possible, but went, let me try to optimize it even more. And on the way to optimization, he ended up making an enemy out of, like, pretty much everyone in the game.
Yeah.
Unintentionally.
We can get into the actual playing part. There was like a pregame portion that all of that happened in, and then now they're actually allowed to play cards for the next hour. We meet Dealer Farley, who we did meet in episode 1. There was enough other stuff going on in episode 1, and the dealer did not have too much to do, but he's a fun character to introduce, and he'll have some interactions with some of the players. But wanted to at least shout him out and mention that he's one of our cast members. There's another woman that is a dealer that talks with some of the players sometimes, and then we also have the announcer. that's we've got the woman announcer voice that the players don't hear, and we've got the male announcer bandage man that the players do hear.
Yeah.
So a lot of different production characters as well in this.
Yes. Obviously, they don't play as big a role, but they are certainly there, so they do deserve to be mentioned.
Yeah, and game kicks off. Rox and Nuchka play immediately. They score their 9-0, and I wanted to point out kind of an interesting parallel. So Rick was the tactician and offered to be the 0 to Fabian's 9. That Rick was going to score 0 points. And Roxanne's the same thing. She comes up with the plan, and she's also going to take 0 to allow Nuchka to score 9. So I thought that was kind of interesting there.
I mean, when you come up with a plan, I feel like in your mind, the best way to sell someone else on it is to pitch to them how they're going to win. And then you'll just be the beneficiary of their victory. Like, that's a really good way to pitch it. And I think that they both realize that really quickly, and it does do a good job. I also wanted to point out the parallel sort of to last episode where we talked about how Roxanne almost every round would immediately attack someone. And then this time, once again, she immediately goes into playing her cards. Roxanne, no patience. She wants to get things out of the way.
That's funny, yeah. And there are some additional tactics to holding on to your stuff, potentially gaining more information, potentially gaining more bargaining power. In a game like this, again, last episode we kind of brought up the social implications of immediately attacking somebody, not making it feel bad, not drawing out the process for too long. And I think that's kind of a similar thing here. Now, if somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I've got a card, can you help me?" They're both out of cards. So I think that's probably a huge driving factor behind just getting rid of your cards quickly, and is again going to have just like good social implications from it.
Yeah, I agree. They're playing much better socially, while Rick is trying to make the optimal play from a winning the main match perspective, which is that you want to wait for all of your opponents to use up all of their cards. That way there's no way that they can counter what you're about to do.
Right, exactly. They can't see your strategy and then take it for themselves or something like that.
And it does end up really helping them because, do we want to get into the next pair sort of to play? Because this is a really important one in terms of shaping what the group of 4 then does.
Yeah, for sure. And before they even play, Feride asks a really interesting question. You caught this too, that Feride wants to know, now that they've started playing, how much longer, how slow can they play their cards? How much can they draw it out? Because they only have 1 hour, all of the players, to play their cards. So this was kind of a cheeky move from her. If they could play their cards slow enough, then everybody else would still be left with cards, and they wouldn't have Nazir as the sole loser. So I thought that was cool that she at least went for it. But Dealer Varley's not going to allow it. He says, no, we're not doing it like that for this one.
Yeah, but it does definitely show that players are asking questions like this. They're at least thinking a little more outside of the box than maybe you would fully expect, given the first episode was a little shaky. But this episode, players are on it. They're thinking about this game in a really impressive way.
Before we talk about Feride and Annamaja, let me go grab my notepad. Okay, I'm back.
All right.
I thought that was funny. Rick is just so frantic in this one. You gotta love like the entertainment and stuff that he brings. But yeah, very silly. He's gonna go grab his notepad to take notes, and then doesn't even wind up taking notes. He like tears up his paper halfway through when the women are playing, and we'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about them playing, I guess. For a moment.
They start and they spend a good second. They let Rick grab his notepad because they're making sure, instead of doing what other groups are doing where they talk and say what they're going to play, they seem to be under the impression that they can't really talk while at the table. And so they're both going off of this plan laid out on their notepad. But yeah, they start playing, and they don't go in the strategy of like one person starts getting all the wins. It becomes very clear very early on that they're sort of trading wins. And I think that's what frustrates Rick, because at that point it's like, oh, they're not going for the win, they're just going to not lose. And so they keep playing, and Rick tears up his sheet of paper. But the interesting thing happens when they're 5 points to 4 points, and then they choose to play again.
Yeah.
And that's, the announcer even calls it out, where the announcer goes, wait, again? And then we get a nice little flashback moment to something that has happened just a little before the game started, to see the trio sort of agreeing to take some cards from Nizar, so that they could both get some more points and use up more cards.
And I really wish that because it's cool that they realize that Nizar can give away cards. This is the first group to realize something like that, at least how we see it in the episode, and I think that that's true. They didn't quite go the step further of like, there's no real reason to go, like, this group, if any of the groups knows who the loser is, this group knows that Nizar is going to score 0 points. So there's no reason for them to both score 6. And while it was a really cool moment, I wish they had just gone a step further and gone for like an 11-1 and split their 12 points that way. And then that really puts the other groups in an awkward spot, and also means that they would have grabbed an additional GCoin too. So there's a game incentive to do it, even if you're not going to ultimately win.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think, at that point, that wasn't where they were thinking.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, I think that absolutely, not only would it have helped them grab a GCoin, but I think that really would have like thrown the other group off, because of the matter of fact that they're already thrown off by the fact that they're playing more cards. If they were suddenly getting points more than 9, the other group would be in a bit of a panic, I think, where they'd be like, hold on a second, like, we really need to make sure. And they still do, but like, it's one of those things where I do think if they were going for the win, though, they wouldn't want to, or even if they were just going for the 11 strat, they would want the group of 4 to, if possible, play before them. Because then they could come in and not reveal their strategy. Because the fact that they then play more cards, even though Rick stops taking notes, he then afterwards is like, wait a second, I think they played more than 9 cards each. And that prompts the group to go, oh, we can give cards away, which then leads to this whole giving cards away and talking. And then there's a lot of fun that happens like as soon as Annamaja and Feride stop playing, which includes this confusion of the group. Rick wondering, have the two of them already played? I don't think they've already played yet. And then the group of 4 sort of goes off to talk again, while the remaining sort of group of 3, and then Roxanne and Nuchka, just sort of join them in talking about like, oh, that silly group of 4, they haven't played yet. Well, we've all already played, and look at them scrambling to try and figure things out.
Yeah, it's this really silly moment where Rick is like, oh, this doesn't matter, and makes a big deal about tearing up the notepad that he just ran to grab, while Fabian is like, just like, shh, 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 and like diligently taking notes on what they're doing. And then immediately when they're done, Rick like wants to see Fabian's notes because he wasn't paying attention. He stopped paying attention, and now realizing that it's actually really important. So they go and like group up, but just as important as the group of 4 actually trying to figure out the strategy, Roxanne, now with no cards, she's wiped her hands clean of it, she is going to get in a room with, it's Nizar and it's the 4 women that aren't Nelk. And all of them are together. And again, I felt like I credit this to Roxanne's social game in terms of her like bringing that group together, because she's like kind of poking fun at how much all of the other people probably distrust each other. She's like, other than Nelk, none of those people trust each other. And there's kind of like an implication there that's like, all of us here, we can trust each other. And like good, just overall alliance forming there. That even though Roxanne and Nuchka don't work with Nazar, they are kind of, well, they will wind up working with Nazar a little bit, but they also just wind up like getting on his good side, and which that alone is going to save them from being picked from the deathmatch, really, at the end of it.
Actually, yeah, I think that it even goes a little further than that, where Roxanne 1 does an incredible job at just sort of taking this group of 3 and just quietly, quickly scooping herself and Nuchka into the group to make it feel like, aren't we a great group of 5 who can trust each other because we've all like done our part. Well, they're over there being all schemy and like untrustworthy. We're the like good, trustworthy people, and she does a great job of having that like general vibe. And I think it actually helps keep her safe from the deathmatch even more than just being picked by Nazar. The fact that her and Nuchka will then go out and play one more pair of cards. And I actually think that this is really important, that Nazar gives them this extra pair of cards to give Roxanne one win, because that forces the majority
to do that.
Yeah, and that forces the majority's hand to pick Nazar, because I think that if Roxanne was available, they know Nazar is going to pick one of them. Roxanne, even though she probably will, she might not. So I think that there is a fairly good possibility that if both were tied at 0 and Fabian had to break the tie and choose the loser, he could choose Roxanne.
Yeah, so and for that aspect, it's really weird that Nazar even offers up his cards to allow Roxanne to score a point. It is going to get him 2 more allies, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Well, actually, I'll just bring it up now. I think now's a good time to bring it up. I do wonder that these players have only seen one deathmatch. They haven't seen 4 seasons of the Korean show. They haven't seen all of these online games that we've played. They've only seen one deathmatch. And it was an extremely social deathmatch. And I have to wonder if part of Nazar's confidence and tactics is the belief that going into the deathmatch with the most allies will be what saves him. And
I agree.
To give away 2 more cards, make 2 more allies, and even the fact that I guess the women only asked for 4 cards anyways, or 3 cards from him. They never asked for all of his cards, so it's not like he held on to them like intentionally here. But either way, he gives away 2 more cards and can build allies. And I really have to think that he was just banking on the DM being social once again, which is certainly awkward in terms of like setting the players' expectations if they've never seen these games before. So yeah, that part's interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that explains a lot about his confidence and his willingness to give away those cards to secure his spot in the deathmatch, because he is looking at this as a numbers game, and as the more allies you have, the better. Which unfortunately, in this upcoming deathmatch, will not quite be the case.
Yeah, this one is not going to be quite so social.
But now we have our group of 4.
Yep. And I like too that we see some more stuff from like Dealer Farley here, that he's not like giving up anything to Fabian, trying to like fish for information. I did want to say that, so I'm not sure if it's exactly right here in the episode, but there's a part where I believe it's Fabian is like trying to look at the card slot in the table to see how many cards have been played, and Dealer Farley like sticks his hand over it and doesn't allow him to peer in. While it was a cute moment, and I did laugh at that, I think that he shouldn't have done it, Dealer Farley. I think that he should have let him look, because I don't know how much you can let him look, and they could have covered it up better or something like that, but it felt like an aspect to me, again, where like part of the skill in the genius is like these creative observational tactics, and I thought that was like a cheeky move from Fabian to try to look through the stuff. I can kind of understand it, but like if there's no cover on it, then don't like put your hand over it just when you catch somebody. But I don't know, it's a small nitpick, but just giving the players like the creative freedom, I guess, to try to get sneaky, it can be good. But I can understand wanting to cover it up too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really blame Dealer Farley or anything though, because he's been pretty adamant about like wanting to keep the information safe, and I can understand why the show wouldn't want that mystery to be gone for the majority, because that takes away a lot of their like paranoid planning to ensure that they get the most points. So like I'm fine with it, but I do agree, like, let him peek. I don't think they were going to get much anyways, considering that Fabian's little peek in is like there's not that many cards there, even though everyone but the group before had already played.
What can you actually get from that? Not much. And I don't know how far you want to take that. Like, you don't want to let him take the cards out of the thing.
Definitely,
obviously. Maybe there's a little bit of room to have fun with that. But we are going to see this group of four eventually play, and I don't have too much to say about what they do. They eventually land on a 1-1-1-15 split, right? Yeah, 18 points total. 1-1-1-15, which they hadn't realized until they saw the group of three and realized that you can give up cards. So that was cool, just to see the how everything kind of came into being, how all the information got out there. But what do you think about this group of four's final decision here?
Yeah, I mean, considering that they were playing as a group of four, that's the best optimal strategy to have. It earns them the most points. So like, not much to say other than they played this as optimally as they could to ensure that one of their four won. And so Fabian becomes the first player of this season to win 2 main matches, 2 episodes in. Very good track record for this man so far.
2 rings of life. And I do feel like, while I get that the group of 3 didn't quite have all of their tactics together, I think that, so I really liked Nazar going to lose and saying, I'm going to be the one that loses this game, just because he had already lost. So once you already lost, own it. However, when you are going to lose so that you can pick somebody else for the deathmatch, you can't just play for the loss, which is what Nazar does. You have to use your game pieces and figure out, how am I going to get the person that I want to duel into the deathmatch? Because a lot of these games have ways that if you want to, you can try to lose them. But the important thing isn't just losing, it's then who are you going to make win, and can you guarantee, because he could have guaranteed the safety of Annamaja and Feride, and he doesn't have to because he knows he's not going to pick them, but he could have tried to at least get them to win. Now, he wouldn't have been able to beat 15, but maybe Annamaja and Feride both score 1, and then they give all of their cards to Roxanne and Nuchka. And then we see Roxanne and Nuchka would have been able to score, let's say, 10 more points to put them at 19. And then we've got a point where we've got Nuchka as the sole winner, and Rick then doesn't get a Ring of Life or Token of Immortality, whatever it's called, and is able to get picked. So I thought that was a little bit of a mismanage there from the group, unfortunately. But we are going to see, Rick and Fabian are safe, and Nazar has got that extra card, so he is our elimination candidate.
Yeah, and he makes his choice for the death match, and I find it really interesting that in his choice, it seems like because Nelk had already been to a death match, she wasn't at all like in his real consideration, because he says that he was like, with Rick safe, it was between Fabian and Thomas, and since Fabian's also safe, he has to pick Thomas, and that's where he makes his choice.
Yeah, I think that there is, so I think that that's definitely a part of it. I think that one other thing that we don't see too much of, but I think that there was a little bit of Nelk at least attempting to integrate herself with the other groups and still seem trustworthy to everyone overall. Thomas feels a little bit more in that regard like if the plan is Rick, if the plan is fuck Rick, Thomas feels a little bit more fuck Rick than Nelk does. So that's part of it. But I do think a huge part was that Nelk had been in the deathmatch already. Yeah. But again, if Nazar is thinking that this is a social deathmatch, Nelk already won a social deathmatch. Nobody dislikes Nelk. So there is definitely a bigger incentive to pick Thomas in that capacity too, because then you can have all of the women united against Thomas and on your side. So I think that is part of it. And then I also have to say that there's another implication here, just that Thomas is a little bit underestimated, and that's not totally like fair to say, because it's not like I don't know if this would have necessarily scared Nazar away, but in hindsight, like knowing everything that you do now, there's no way that you pick Thomas for this death match now knowing how good he's going to be, right? Like he's pretty good in his ability to figure out the tactics. So that might protect Thomas in some death matches going forward where people are a little bit more afraid to want to challenge him directly.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Do we want to go into the deathmatch now?
Yeah, I'm running. We're a little bit shorter on time this week, so we'll go through it a little bit.
There's this week. There's slightly less like moving parts to talk about because this is just a one-on-one, and the game is what do they call it? On track.
On track, aka monorail from the Korean seasons of the game. And it's an interesting game because it is technically like a solved game, a solvable game, though it's not going to be able to be solved immediately. And the players don't have too much time to come up with tactics and things. They've got some ideas of tactics, but for the small amount of time that they had, I think that Thomas comes up with a pretty cool strategy.
I think Thomas comes up with an incredible strategy. I believe it's been confirmed that they had about 10 minutes between learning of the deathmatch and then having to actually play it, which is an incredibly short turnaround of time. And the fact that Thomas comes up with this move of the 3 straight lines, which is solvable, and the show says in only one way. There is technically 3 ways, but they're all generally the same thing. They're all pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. So it's very tough for the opponent to react to, because if they make one mistake, you can call them out on it. Mm-hmm. And I think that because of that, like him being able to come to that conclusion in only 10 minutes is incredibly indicative of like how good he is going to be at these like strategy death matches.
And I do have to say, I feel like we both wanted to take Thomas first in the draft, and there was something about him that we definitely saw, but we didn't just like in his overall demeanor. But in terms of up until this point, we almost haven't even seen anything great from Thomas. As much as we both liked him, we knew that there was something there. But main match one, he won. He was the snake. Big whoop. Who cares? Yeah. He was good at. He didn't do anything. Then in this game, he didn't really come up with any great tactics overall. And in the deathmatch last week, he just kind of gives away the 7, and he gets to choose who wins and loses. But it's not like he came up with those tactics either. But this is where, I don't know, I think like we saw it in his eyes or something, and knew that he was going to be good. Main character energy. He comes up with these 3 straight lines. I am curious because I believe, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but my basic understanding of Monorail, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, in that it's a solved game and you want to go second. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact way that this game is solved, but I do know that the move that he made, I believe, and I could be mistaken because I haven't rewatched the episode, but I believe is the opening move of someone who wins one of these death matches in the Korean version as well. So
it's definitely a tricky move to like put your opponent on their toes, and that's why it's very good. But I believe the strategy of the game is that the amount of pieces that are available are either divisible. I believe they're divisible by 4 is like the whole point of the game. And if they're not divisible by 4, then the play is you go first and you play, like say there's 18 pieces.
Yep.
Then you go first and you play 2, so that way there's 16 pieces left.
Yeah.
And then the pieces are divisible for. Okay, so there's 16.
Yeah. So you want to go second, and you always want to complete a group of 4.
You always want to complete a group of 4. So
that you'll be able to finish. Yeah.
Fabian expresses something similar to this. He's a little bit wrong. He says when they play 1, you play 1. They play 2, you play 3. It's close to that. When they play 1, you play 3. When they play 3, you play 1, and when they play 2, you play 2. And in that capacity, the game is solved. Now, you can still do some other tricky things around that, and I even think saying that it's solved is a little bit of an oversimplification, because there's probably ways to tactfully place one piece at a time in a way that your opponent will be unable to do runs of 3 for the rest of the game. And in that way, you can kind of break that multiple of 4 thing and put the advantage back in your favor. But that's like what I meant a little bit when I was saying solved. There's probably more articles and things that if people say it's solved, I'm sure it is. I'm sure there are moves where regardless of what your opponent does, going second, there's a way to win. But either way, we see like the important thing in the Genius isn't that like these players have practiced Monorail for years and are really good at it. As I said in like my introductory video, it's all about how creative can you get with this brand new game that you've never seen before. And for that, I think that Thomas does a really, really fantastic job with the game. And basically just wins it on the first turn. The game only takes place over 2 turns. It gets drawn out a little bit. Like I said, we can't really draw it out too much longer for the podcast because I've got a hard out in just a few minutes. But we are going to see Thomas make one move, Nazar makes a move, and then Thomas calls impossible, and that's basically it. There is some drama there that we can talk about, but the game's over. Yeah,
I want to give. Yeah, I want to give Nazar credit for even though he's wrong about how the game is played. If he was right about being able to make 2 separate loops, he made a brilliant play.
Cue in the Extreme Ways move. Here's our Geniusity of the episode. Nazar making those 2 tracks and then totally flipping. And he was so confident that a part of you watching it believes that it's possible that he can make 2 tracks and win this game, right?
Yeah. And then, but unfortunately, it was not.
And I was cheering for Thomas in like every capacity because that was such a cool move to start off with. And then I was back to cheering for Nazar because how crazy of an upset would that have been? And it's like I said, we haven't seen, Thomas was the snake. Who cares? If we lose him, I'd be fine. If we could have gotten this really awesome hero moment with Nazar, that could have been really quite cool.
Yeah, but ultimately we say goodbye to Nazar. It is sort of a heartfelt exit where it's expressed many times that like the cast in general does really love him, and finds him to be just like a great, likable person. But unfortunately, circumstances being what they are, he lost the deathmatch and he must go.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, wow, are we gonna see for just a split second there our last pick person dethrone the snake from the snake draft, but unfortunately those rules were not in his favor. I did want to point out one last thing before we wrap up, just an interesting note. I'm sure we will get some kind of recap on Garnets, or GCoins as they're called, but during the deathmatch, a total disparity in GCoins there. Thomas has 6. So I believe that as a show of we're sorry that you lost because of this and are going to the deathmatch. But if he had 6 GCoins, that means that he received all 3 of the winning GCoins.
Yes.
From Fabian and Rick. Or maybe he received like there's also a potential that like he got 2 of the GCoins from Fabian, 1 went to Nelk, and then like Rick threw him a GCoin as well just to try to buy some favor. And Rick definitely needs it. He's gonna need some favor. We saw in like the preparation phase, Thomas didn't even want anything to do with him.
Completely left out.
Yeah, completely left out of both sides. That's true.
Yeah.
But on the other side though, Nazar had 0 GCoins, so he must have given his away knowing that he was going into the deathmatch and just wanting to help his allies out in any way. He says, you'll fight for me in spirit, you'll play for me in spirit, but ultimately that is going to be his removal from the Genius the Netherlands. And that's basically all we got time for today. But a really cool episode, a lot of fun, and it was definitely fun to really see a lot of these players come into their own and not even just have the strategy on the levels that we wanted from the Genius, but surpass that in some ways and really just have a lot of good and fun tactics and gameplay going on here.
Yeah. Absolutely. This cast is, they're doing a great job. And like with every passing episode, I'm just getting more and more excited for the next one. It was an incredible episode. It was an incredible time. And I had a great time talking to you too, all about it.
Yeah, likewise, Gemini. Thank you very much for joining me. And thank you guys very much for joining us here today. And not quite the 3 hours of the last one, gave you about half that. I think the first one we did the draft and then we also had all of like the introductions and stuff. I was thinking it would be fun to have like an additional power rankings adjusted after this episode, because I'd be curious if like we would draft the players in the same capacity. So maybe that's something we can revisit in a future one. I definitely think that after seeing this one, we put Roxanne way too low last week. She is an all-star.
Absolutely.
I don't see her. I see her going to the finals at this point. I don't know. She's got to get unlucky or something's got to go wrong for her to get stopped. But she seems like she's got it all together. So I'm really excited to see how all of this plays out for sure.
Great steal for me. I'm so happy I got her there.
Yeah.
For sure. In a future week we can absolutely revisit it. But for now, this is probably it.
Yeah. So thank you guys very much for watching. That's going to be it for us. I'm No Lex Given, here with Gemini. Peace.